Hey, what's going on? This is the OG Kickoff, a Double Down and Next Round media production. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, you and I are eligible to podcast. I don't know who will actually be eligible to play football this year. And after this recent snip, snap, sip, snap of the 2022 class for the 5-for-5 thing, I have even less of an idea of who's going to be playing football this year. But people will probably play football this year, and that's the only thing I'm confident in saying.
I mean, all we can do at this point is laugh, right? Like, this is actually a clown show. And it's funny that if your state is, let's call it locked in enough to already have kind of like the state level injunction, you're technically good. But yeah, I was joking with you off air. Like, we can't even say don't care anymmer. The season is 2 weeks away. Some people are going to play or they're not. Like, we got dudes on NFL rosters signing college football deals.
But you know, they're apparently going to be snipped and unable. That's the wrong way to phrase it after I made a vasectomy reference. But they're apparently not going to be able to play. We'll see. At this point, I'm not going to pretend to know every single 5-for-5 guy who has a temporary restraining order. If you see the acronym TRO, that's what that's referring to. TRO, as I like to say it in its full form. But yeah, we are this close to a college football season, and there are teams across college football going, I'm not sure if we're going to have that. Maybe this guy's eligible. Maybe he's not. There's probably a whole lot of stuff that's yet to unfold with that. But that is just the latest in the ongoing saga of who in the world knows who's in charge, and just wait for a judge to rule something against that person that may or may not be in charge.
Just imagine what it's like. The guys that played a preseason game entered the transfer portal, found out they couldn't be on a college roster, and just like showed back up with their stuff at NFL training camp.
Jack Pyburn.
Like, oh, you're on this here again, guys. Look, did you miss your 9 a.m., brother? You ready to go to work?
Jack Pyburn, former LSU great, former Florida great. He had 2 sacks in a preseason game, and he's like, I'm going back to college. We're good. All right. We have a great show lined up. We have a few thoughts that I want to get to on the Brent Venables extension, kind of how all that unfolded and the timing of it, and a lot of different takeaways, I think, from news that we got on Thursday. And we have a mailbag episode that we're going to get to with mailbag questions and takes that you have provided us, the ogkickoff@gmail.com. And we're going to get to a bunch of those today. I've been meaning to be able to get to those. Peter Burns is going to join us in a little bit. We discussed his viral community note tweet, year one SEC coaches, getting to spend some time with them behind the scenes, some LSU things and much more. And then we're going to close with a little bit of housekeeping that I need to get to here. But let's start with the Brent Venables extension and raise that we found out about on Thursday. He is making now an average of $10.5 million a year, one of the 10 highest paid coaches in the sport. And many people are asking the question, and Will, you could be included in this. I might be a little bit included in this too. Why now? Why now did Brent Venables get this extension when this is someone who is trying to have consecutive winning seasons for the first time at Oklahoma, is trying to win his first postseason game at Oklahoma, and is entering year 5, still not making as much as Lincoln Riley's making at USC. But why now is the question that I saw a lot of people asking.
I'm shocked they didn't just give him like the $1 extra Nick Saban deal with Lincoln Riley. Yeah, I mean, and I did cheat a little bit. Maybe I looked at your homework, but the way I saw this was through your tweet saying because of Clemson. And I probably would have arrived at that same thing, which is that basically it doesn't matter where you're going to get hired. It matters where you can sell that you're going to get hired. And a place like that is always going to be tempting for a Venables who had so much success there.
Okay, so a few things on that. I try, when I see extensions come out like this, I try and be as present as possible with both sides of the argument. Why would a coach, or really a coach's agent, Jimmy Sexton, push for something like this to get done now? And then also on the flip side of it, why would an athletic director agree to an extension, a significant raise, and the type of contract that makes you go, wait a minute, he got this type of money when there was nobody that was trying to get him from Oklahoma right now. It's not like this is happening in early December or something like that, or even kind of like one of those mid-season Kurt Cignetti new deals as the Penn State job opens up and all that. So the timing of this, understand some of the context here. Roger Denny is the new athletic director at Oklahoma. It takes over for a longtime AD, Joe Castiglione. Takes over at a place that has not fired a football coach in the 21st century. Okay. Outside of Iowa, like who else has just not fired a football coach in the 21st century? Maybe Utah, if I'm doing this correctly, because Whittingham stepped down and resigned. Urban went to Florida. Like big time college football programs not firing a coach in the 21st century, unheard of. Oklahoma exists in that world. They do not exist in the world that many others in the SEC do of paying these ridiculous buyouts, or even in the world that Texas has lived in with paying buyouts to the likes of Tom Herman and Charlie Strong and those guys. So understand that dynamic there at a place that has long since loved its football tradition and long since loved having a tradition at head coach where they feel like they have stability, right? So Roger Denny steps in as AD. And if you're looking at Venables as this guy that has not had consecutive winning seasons, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm not sold on him. And I'd like to make my splash as a new AD, knowing that this will probably be one of the defining things of how I handle the football situation during my time at Oklahoma. You are probably presented with this proposal from Jimmy Sexton, and you're thinking, what are my options? If I say no, we're not going to give you this raise after you went to the college football playoff. You won 10 games last year. You did the thing that we've been wanting to do in the post-Lincoln Riley era. If I say no, the tone that it sets with Brent Venables is at least noteworthy. Okay. And I don't know how many times ADs tell coaches and their agents no, but it sets an interesting precedent. And it sets a precedent ahead of what I expect to be a pivotal year at Clemson. Clemson is a place that I don't think anybody is looking at right now going, oh, yeah, Dabo Swinney's absolutely cooked no matter what happens this year, right? It would take a seismic shift in philosophy for Dabo Swinney to get fired this year. But Clemson starts off with a loss against LSU. Clemson starts off with maybe a loss or two in ACC play in the first, 6 weeks of the season. All of a sudden, people are going, is this it for Dabo? And the very first person that Clemson would be looking at to fill that vacancy is a guy that loves Clemson very much, and that's one Brent Venables. Okay? So I'm not saying that that was the only thought rattling around Roger Denny's mind when he's presented with this potential raise extension for his head coach, who has not checked all of the boxes, but has certainly checked some of them. But it is a dynamic that's worth remembering as it factors into all of this, and it factors into the timing. At least it does in my 30,000 foot view as I try and look above the situation and evaluate why each party acted the way that it did.
Yes. I just wanted to follow up on your earlier note. Utah, this is how rare this is, folks. So great pull on Utah. They actually had a head coach named Ron McBride from 1990 to 02, who they fired in 02 before hiring Urban Meyer and then hiring Kyle Whittingham. So this is impossible to do because even their coach who had been there for 20 plus years overstayed his welcome. And after like a 5-win season, they were like, how about you go coach at Weber State?
And they were in the Mountain West at the time too. So if you want to say like, hey, a big time college football program like Iowa, I don't know if you consider Iowa to be a big time college football program. They are certainly a respected big time college football program among college football fans. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. Like it's unheard of. So like they're not living in this space of fear. They're living in a space of we have the right foundation. We now have the right guy building our roster, which is Jim Nagy. And ever since that addition happened, they feel like we have things going in the right direction. They do not feel like their floor is going to be what it is. The irony is that the last time we were having this type of conversation 2 years ago, a week before Oklahoma is officially set to join the SEC, and then they come out with this extension for Brent Venables, and we're going, well, that's noteworthy. And instead of now looking at his situation this year, where let's say with what I believe is the best team that he's had, if all of a sudden he had started off like 3-3 with that really difficult front half of the schedule that's going to have them going to play games away from home against the likes of Michigan, Georgia, and Texas, of course. If all of a sudden like they got off to this bad start, what Roger Denny clearly did not want to happen is have people say, He's on the hot seat. You have to make a decision about that $26.2 million buyout. Or alternatively, could Brent Venables just leave for Clemson? And could Oklahoma have its second coach of the 2020s leave for a different program and follow in the footsteps of Florida State? That's
Yeah,
essential, or not Florida State, but Oregon, rather, with the way that it played out with Willie Taggart going to Florida State. That's what I meant to say.
I was imagining Willie Taggart. Yes.
But yeah, like Florida State did deal with that from the Jimbo Fisher side of it, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And no, that being said, with Oklahoma, by choice, by fate, they've ended themselves in just a perception off, right? It feels like right now, very few are less concerned with or more concerned with perception than Oklahoma. And, you look across the aisle at a Texas who has been more successful in the SEC. You look at Lincoln Riley at USC, and you basically say, we are doubling, tripling down on the Oklahoma way. The grass is green here. We've done all these things to basically set up our guy that he can be really successful here. And so they're totally locked in. They're head and shoulders, they're 10 toes down. And so I think that they are headed towards either tremendous success or a very messy breakup. But that's what they've done from day one of the Venables train. So I think this is pretty expected.
From day one, they have said, we want to win the breakup. They haven't come out right and said that. Oklahoma is insistent on winning the breakup, and they could care less. They couldn't care less, I should say. They could not care less about people that are going like, oh, it could be a surprise firing this year. It would have been something worth actually discussing because of those dynamics, because of a new AD that is in charge, and you haven't had to spend money like that before. So in theory, like if things got really nasty this year for Brent Venables, like you could go to those places. But now they're saying, no. We have our foundation in place. We're going to build on this. And we feel like we are ready to really have that high floor in the SEC that we have aspired to have. And it's interesting because now Brent Venables became the 12th coach in the SEC to get either a raise, an extension, or a new contract in the last 365 days. Think about that, Will. There are only 4 coaches in the SEC who have not gotten one of those things, a modified contract in the last 365 days. One of them is Kirby Smart. He ain't going anywhere. One of them is Jeff Lebby. A little bit interesting. One of them is Shane Beamer, who got a raise and an extension in the beginning of 2025. Steve Sarkisian is the last one, who got a raise and an extension at the beginning of 2025. But in terms of the last 365 days, that's what we're talking about. 12 coaches. And it helps that 6 new coaches in the conference. So we're talking about like, hey, who's basically starting over and who has gotten the nod of approval from a boss saying, yes, I believe in you. That's what this is all about.
And even within that scope, right? Like there are some that you can kind of see they're getting the dreaded vote of confidence. But even within the concept of Texas, getting the ability to go out and get Cam Coleman and saying we need to upgrade our roster. South Carolina, getting the new offensive coordinator hired
and retaining those guys and being able to not just go out and get Kendall Briles and have like a pretty significant purse to be able to go out and get the right OC, but having the money to be able to retain the likes of Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor and Dylan Stewart. Really important with the financial backing that Shane Beamer has, albeit in ahead of what's going to be a pivotal season that'll define his time in Columbia.
Yeah, and so basically they're activating the donor base in some way, right? For their standpoint,
Yes.
they'd probably tell you, I'd rather have X, Y, and Z than an extension. We're just trying to win football games. They got X, Y, and Z, the thing that they would rather, a established quarterback. They got some roster help. They got some extra staffers. So I think that they're all investing the money in some way. It's not like they're going cheap.
Yeah, and Oklahoma now is going into the season with their head coach locked in through the year 2031, and anytime that Oklahoma misses out on the college football playoff, because it's Oklahoma, people are going to look to those buyout numbers. History suggests, probably. Well, you could point in the other direction. Oklahoma hasn't had to pay one of these buyouts before, so maybe history doesn't suggest that they'll all of a sudden have to start paying one of those buyouts. But
what if you just go to their AD and you're like, hey, you got to like pay this buyout? He's like, huh? We've never done that before. You mean this money's real? I thought this was like a deferred year in the NFL.
Yeah, so like I don't know how this is ultimately going to turn out, but everybody and their mother who looked at this with one eyebrow raised is like, huh? Surely that won't come back to bite you, and surely you're not going to be financially locked in when that 8-4, that 7-5 season comes about and you just don't have the offensive answers. That's the situation everybody's forecasting, and kind of understandably so. We talked about it with the Kalen DeBoer extension, and if that could end up looking like bad money and a dumb extension, we're going to know. We talk about these things, and we'll always look back and go, well, what was the alternative? What happens if you didn't give Brent Venables this extension? Well, it is a new athletic director. Clearly, Jimmy Sexton wanted to see where his client stood with a new AD. So that's why this type of thing happens. It's not just simply like, oh, you know what? We felt like he was definitely going to bail no matter what. I do think the Clemson thing is at least something in the back of their mind. Okay. And I'm sure that was thrown out at some point in more words than maybe more or less words. But yeah, another coach gets extended and another coach joins the 8-figure salary club. How about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just pivot off of this, Connor. Tyler from Spartanburg motivated Dabo. Last year, you gave him some bad rat poison. You said they weren't going to beat LSU. He put that all over the locker room and then lost LSU. Now you're saying they're going to lose LSU again. Can Dabo go 0-2 against Connor O'Gara? Many are asking.
Many are asking. I don't know that I'm going to put out the same sort of. I don't. It wasn't bulletin board material, even though Dabo certainly took
he made it that. That's what's so beautiful about him. Anything can be bulletin. They could be like, "Hey, Dabo, nice hair." He's like, "Oh, okay. You think I'm a pretty boy?"
Yeah, exactly. No, it's funny considering I just asked the exact question about LSU on the last pod. Like, are we sure LSU is going to be that good in the trenches, or are we sure they're going to be able to stop the run at an elite rate? So, if anything, I've said more positive things about Clemson, and that game could be a dogfight. So, who am I if I'm saying those things about Dabo? Oh, I just remember Chad Morris. Yeah.
I was waiting on you to bring him up.
Okay. Oh, all roads lead back to the Chad. Okay. We have a mailbag. I've been wanting to do this for a little bit. Thank you to everyone who emailed us, theogkickoff@gmail.com. We have several of these emails that I want to get to, and we're going to go down a bunch of different roads with this because we got a lot of different questions. Let's start with this one from Ollie. Oliver Hodgkinson, as he is known as, aka Ollie from the College Chaps podcast that he hosts with our guy George Somerville. He asked a very simple question. Connor, what's your take on international college football games? We have this year, week 0, UNC, TCU in Dublin. That's the game that is actually going to be worth tuning into in week 0 when you're like, oh, this slate isn't that particularly good. We don't slander the slate ever, but that will be fantastic theater because of whatever skeleton UNC is rolling out there in Dublin. And then week 3, we have Kansas against Arizona State in London, that game being played in Wembley. Well, the more I've thought about this, the more I've realized that I have an unpopular take about international games, and it's probably not what you think.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you're going to play a neutral site game and not one with like a traditional neutral site background of Florida, Georgia, Red River, or something like that, you just might as well make it an international game. Does that mean I want every team sacrificing a home game and playing internationally? No way. No. I want as many games on college campuses as humanly possible. I need that on the record, okay? But neutral site games are cash grabs. That's what they are. And as Josh Pate pointed out, the whole point of experienced college football is to be on campuses, right? So if you're getting away from that, you're not giving anyone a true college football experience to begin with, okay? Where I will disagree with Josh, who has been very outspoken against international games, I would rather see a game in Dublin than in Dallas, okay? I just would. If you're going to make it an experience, make it a truly unique experience for those players and for those fans. Talk to fans who go abroad for these games and ask if they had a bad time drinking Dublin dry. Okay. Like Nebraska Northwestern played in a game in which those two teams did absolutely nothing that year. And I guarantee you, if you ask one of those fans who like attended that game, they'll say, yeah, oh yeah, Dublin was the highlight of the year. Not even close. Like come on. It was great. Talk to players after they return, not beforehand. They'll probably dread every college athlete when they're told you have to go abroad for something is like, oh, and I get it. I totally get it.
The ones that play, the backups are probably having the times of their life. I'm sitting on a bench. I'd rather be in a bench in Dublin.
Yeah. And I've talked to coaches who have the international travel games lined up, and I completely understand why they don't like it. Coaches like the controlled variables. They don't want the uncontrollable things. Like the body clock stuff alone is tough to manage. Very hot topic of conversation right now with the Rams and 49ers playing the week 1 game in Australia and kind of what those two teams are doing about it. But like even when you're talking about Dublin, that's still a body clock issue. And they obviously care about all that stuff. College football, though, it is indeed growing internationally. And as you've heard George Somerville talk on our show and others, if the Premier League can have a following here in the United States, albeit not being on American soil, then why can't college football get more popular there? I think there's more juice behind that argument than the SEC's argument that it is essentially it could operate like the Premier League and break away and do its own thing. I'll hear the international games argument more so with than I will that. And for what it's worth, I'm not saying that a fan of Arizona State should care about that. Okay, I'm talking about from my perspective as I look at this. That is not their problem. If you're a fan of one of these teams and you find out that your home game is all of a sudden gone, and you're like, oh, it's in Dublin or it's in London, and I don't have the means. Maybe I'm a local in Scottsdale or something like that, and I go to all these home games. But then you factor in the travel, and it's just not an experience I'm willing to sign up for. I get it. I totally get it. But I do think that if we're going to do the international game, we need to think about this logically. An 8-hour flight to Dublin, at least that's what it is like from the East Coast. It's not that different from a cross-country flight of going from California to the East Coast, which we now see in conference play.
Yeah, if FSU's playing at Stanford, that's a good point. It's like, how much worse is the flight to Dublin really?
It's really not. Again, give me college games on college campuses. Okay. I get that. But if you're signing up for the non-traditional neutral site, and you're like, yeah, you know what? Let's just make some money off of this. Let's not do a home and home. Let's make sure we elevate our financial floor with this. Yeah, man, put it in Dublin. Put it in Dublin. Put it in something like that that is actually cool and make it an experience and not just stick it at another NFL stadium.
Yeah, you know what? I'm with that. I'd rather it be in Dublin than Dallas. That's a good one. And I think overall, when we've just slowly accepted okay, we're going to move these games. We're going to have kickoff games. They're going to be in these random places. And then to the point about conference realignment, it would be one thing if this was, we were watching Herschel Walker play these regional teams and it was on local television, like we're taking away from that and going moving people. But in reality, yeah, I mean, the SEC, I think, is probably the most regional conference still, and you're still looking at a Florida to like Mizzou. I mean, those teams were in the same division, right? And so that being said, like I think that part of being a college athlete overall is travel, and that happens way more in other sports. These volleyball teams, these basketball teams that go play in Maui and the Bahamas and all that different stuff. Like I think college football is actually kind of late to that game. And we heard this week, actually, Roger Goodell say basically it's becoming more likely that there's going to be a non-US NFL team, which can't wait to see how that's gonna end up. But it's all about money, but so is a kickoff game. So yeah, I think let's send them to somewhere that they may never go again versus Dallas or Yankee Stadium. Why would you want to play a football game in Yankee Stadium?
That's a great point, Will. I love Wrigley. College football games at Wrigley are ridiculous. They don't even fit. They can't even get the end zone right. But they have to at the exact right. Like I have buddies that have been to these games and I'm like, it's cold. Just not really set up for that. Like it's just, I don't know, make an international game in the right setting. I'm not saying all settings. I'm not saying that you need to make fans go to Australia or something to watch their team play. All right, the NFL is crazy for doing that. But
they put Iowa in Australia, buddy.
Yeah.
They'd make some fans. So you show up, you drink, you hate each other. This
I
is
know.
rugby.
Yeah, like if an SEC team announces today, which there could be some of those conversations moving forward, as these teams look for alternative revenue streams, like be prepared. This is not a crazy thing. George has talked about that in the past. Like there are SEC teams that are definitely trying to look at the financials and figure this out. If you are already resigning yourself to the fact that like we're moving this game off of a campus, open yourself up to that. And I would say if you have the means to do these things, like international games are not the worst thing in the way that some might assume that they are. Again, campuses are the best, okay? But it's not the end of the world. Okay. Michael Dark. Great email from Michael. He says, hey guys, always fun talking to you guys on the Nothing Finer podcast. He says technical difficulties kept me from getting on the pod with Will. It was great to see Michael. Got to go on with those guys. Shout out to Emery. Got to go on with them last week. It was a lot of fun. Forgot to bring this up with Connor, but I want credit when this happens. Georgia Southern walks into the fake Death Valley and beats Clemson, ending Dabo's career. Speaking of the Clemson vacancy, Georgia Southern.
There's the bulletin board material right there.
Oh, there it is. Georgia Southern is the Grim Reaper for Core 4 programs. Love the Core 4 reference. In 2013, they beat Florida in the Swamp, and in 2022, beating national championship winning coach Scott Frost in Lincoln, Nebraska. For what it's worth, the final nail in the coffin for Mark Richt, in my opinion, wasn't Fatan Bauta. My bad. I even had the pronunciation down here, and I still messed up the pronunciation of Fatan Bauta.
They will just say that guy's name at tailgates and laugh. It's one of my favorite things about Georgia. Oh, that's like, yeah, that's the rough years.
Hand up, read it too fast. It was going to overtime in Athens against Georgia Southern in 2015 and just squeaking by. I love this prediction from Michael. This is awesome. I love this prediction so much that I'm mad at myself for not coming up with it. It is great to look into the crystal ball and see something like that because he's right. This is not talked about enough, okay? That 2013 Florida loss to Georgia Southern, it ended Florida's bowl eligibility hopes that year. And it was going to happen a week later against Florida State. Like, even if they had beaten Georgia Southern, they were going to lose to Florida State. Florida State won the national championship that year. But if you had beaten Georgia Southern, like, Florida could have at least sold a nothing to lose game against Florida State. Make of that what you will. Remember, though, Georgia Southern was an FCS team at that point, okay? You had Jeff Monken, that's right, the current Army head coach, running the triple option, and Georgia Southern didn't complete a pass in that game. They didn't complete a pass. They had 429 rushing yards, Will, in a game that was pay-per-view. Yeah, pre-SEC Network era. Florida was probably fortunate that very few people got to watch them puke on their shoes. They were down double digits in the fourth quarter, that one, to a 4-loss FCS team. And that was just right. The point of no return for Muschamp. Jerick McKinnon had the game-winning touchdown run in the fourth quarter. How Florida did not fire Muschamp before he even walked off that field is now somewhat baffling to look back on, right? And I wasn't as locked into all things SEC at that time, 2013, so I'm not going to pretend like I had full context of that. But I do remember him having basically the hottest seat in America going into 2014. And if you can't stop an you're a defensive-minded head coach, and you can't stop an FCS triple option team in November, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing here? We already know the quarterback thing is existing, and you can't figure that out. If you can't even tackle in space against an FCS team, like, you have no purpose here whatsoever. I have some other thoughts I want to get to, but Will, do you have any memories of watching that game, or like the takeaways, or the, oh my God, how is this real life that Florida fans were dealing with after losing to Georgia Southern?
Certainly. That was the game that the two Florida players were blocking each other, I believe. That was a moment in SEC.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a funny moment in time. And the best part is Jerick McKinnon becoming a good NFL player who was relevant for 6 or so years, and just being like, hey, it's actually kind of did age pretty well. But yeah, I mean, that was, remember, Saban had the maybe his famous quote where he's like, they ran through us like bleep through a tin horn. That was also about Georgia Southern. So they kind of had that rep coming into that game too. So it was one of those games where it was unbelievable at the time, but then when you look back at it, you're like, actually, it does kind of make sense. You had this great NFL player. You had an over his head, arrogant coach for Florida. And again, that triple option, even against a Saban, is no joke. So yeah, I mean, it's really just a perfect storm for that Florida team that really just got beaten senseless that day. It was funny, man.
I wanted to go back and look at the post 2013 hiring cycle to see what would Florida have done had they fired Muschamp after that game, but that season. The 7 new power conference coaches that year were Bobby Petrino at Louisville, Charlie Strong at Texas, James Franklin at Penn State, Chris Peterson at Washington, Charlie Strong at Texas, Derek Mason at Vandy. Oh, I put Charlie Strong in here twice. Disregard. Steve Sarkisian at USC and Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. So think about that. The irony is that if Florida is making that hiring decision post 2013, it probably comes back with its tail between its legs trying to hire Charlie Strong. Let's be honest. That's how that search would have gone.
And then that probably affects Mullen too, because you can't hire both coordinators from that team. So like that would be the craziest like sliding doors. Because you're right, it's obviously Charlie Strong. You probably think Chris Peterson ended up being the best hire, but he would never leave the situation he was in. Like it was kind of a once in a lifetime situation that he even left where he was. Because I think he was almost like
Boise State and then to Washington. Yeah,
he was at Boise, but I feel like he was almost a consultant role type thing. I don't know if you jumped straight from one to the other, but anyway,
no, he did.
Okay, like I remember there was a lot that came out at the time that was like, you know, it was almost like the Leach to Mississippi State thing where they presented them as like perfect package type thing. And so that being said, like, yeah, it would have been strong. It would have gone terribly.
Yeah. You could also make Dave Clawson within ACC circles, very, very respected for the job that he did there for a very long time. You know, it's interesting because Charlie Strong kind of infamously wanted the Florida job after Ron Zook flamed out. And even though he stayed for the majority of the Urban Meyer era, he didn't stay for that 2010 season because Louisville came calling. And there was talk when he took, I believe it was when he took the Louisville job, that he felt like race had played a part in him not getting jobs in the SEC. And because he had an interracial marriage, that was something that had prevented him from getting big time jobs, and why his road to becoming a head coach at the power conference level was longer than what he felt like it should have been. And with all the great defenses that he had, like, it's kind of hard to tell you that, like, no, you don't deserve a head coaching job. I do think though that Charlie Strong at Florida would have been really similar to Charlie Strong at Texas. Like, what would have been that different if he couldn't make it at a time when the Big 12 was good at that time too? Like, let's not totally dismiss the Big 12 and what it was in the 2010s. Like, they had some real depth at those points. But still, if you couldn't do those things at Texas, what makes me think you would have done them at Florida? Just because, yes, you have the familiarity, that's all well and good. I don't know at that time, even though he would have been, I think he would have had a favorable sell as one of, I think at that time it would have been two, along with Kevin Sumlin, two black coaches currently in the SEC. I think that would have been an actual recruiting advantage that he would have used. But like, he recruited well. Like, Charlie Strong was not like a bad recruiter or anything like that. I just think it would have went really similarly at Florida. I don't think Florida would have been able to woo James Franklin, who's originally from Pennsylvania. Wooing Kirby Smart though, look, we know he flirted with Auburn before that. What's to say Kirby Smart couldn't have crossed enemy lines?
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, hey, look, Charlie Strong, Jeff Banks, just two trailblazers in interracial relationships at the University of Texas. No, that being said, like, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say that with him because he did end up getting the big time job at Texas and flaming out. But I think it's just so much of this stuff is about timing, you know, and that's why it's just such a sliding door domino because, you know, in talking to even Gene Chizik saying how weird these hiring processes were, it really can be a coin flip in a way that we as fans really don't like, you know, sometimes this is just, I like that guy, you know, it's very rarely the guy who comes in with the spreadsheet, the Penn Johnson, if you were, that is the hot name that really has his stuff together and can turn around. Often it's like, oh, you know, your kids went to school with my kids, stuff like that. So that being said, we don't even know the decisions that could have been made because how many decisions have been head scratchers? To your point, something like a Kirby Smart, who also had a little bit of love from South Carolina, I believe. Like, you know, it million things could go different ways with just one of these coaches being the Jenga block that moves.
So obviously Georgia ends up getting Kirby post 2015 when, as Michael said, Mark Richt has that overtime win against Georgia Southern. Georgia won 4 in a row to end that regular season after preseason top ranking, multiple pre-November losses. That's kind of like how I remember a lot of the Mark Richt era. It just seems like Georgia had too many of those seasons with Richt. And I was thinking about this. Not many power conference coaches get fired after a 4-game winning streak, especially now one's in year 15, like Mark Richt was. But that overtime win against Georgia Southern, probably the most famous walk-off touchdown in Sony Michel's career. Oh, is there another one that I'm forgetting?
Many are saying that. That was the real setup there.
Yeah. What a weird final game that was for Rick at Georgia, or at least in Sanford Stadium. That was his final game there. And then, yeah, I remember watching in 2022 when Georgia Southern beat Nebraska as a 3-touchdown dog in Lincoln, in which Georgia Southern gets $1.4 million to come into that stadium and win. And that was shortly after Nebraska took that aforementioned trip to Dublin and lost to Northwestern. I went back and I read the AP recap for the Georgia Southern game. Nebraska before that game, before they lost this 45-42 shootout, in which somehow they couldn't stop anything Clay Helton was doing. Nebraska was previously 214-0 and scoring at least 35 points in Memorial Stadium. And then they lost that game. The other funny thing about that loss, Bill Moose, the previous Nebraska AD, he had a decision to make. Nebraska fans were chanting "Fire Frost" after that loss. Optics matter. Frost had a buyout of $15 million, but it dropped to $7.5 million on October 1st, which was roughly 3 weeks later. And Moose was like, "No, I gotta fire you. You're 5-22 in one-score games, and you just lost to another Sun Belt team at home. Like, what?" And for what it's worth, he did that entirely to keep the sellout streak intact. You cannot convince me otherwise. And you just can't be the AD who watches the sellout streak that dates back to the Kennedy administration come to an end. That would have hung over him forever. And that's why they ultimately paid $7.5 million more to fire Scott Frost than if they just waited 3 weeks. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I mean, that is another Sun Belt team. That's actually so electric. Yeah, you know what's funny too? Speaking of that, we're just talking about some dudes, but speaking of sliding doors, man, I was like, didn't they have like another weird loss? I was thinking about the 2010 loss to UCF in the Liberty Bowl, and that's a point in time where maybe some athletic directors would have pulled the plug on Mark Richt, and a very young Aaron Murray had 2 picks in that game, and then suddenly the rest of Aaron Murray's career happened. So sometimes you shouldn't pull the plug, folks.
Yeah. So, the point is, Georgia Southern confirmed Grim Reaper. Still have Clay Helton there. They're coming for Dabo. Also will Georgia Southern's QB1, Max Johnson. Yeah. We need to remember this. Everybody, I'm telling you right now. I am telling you right now, so that when you turn on this game, when it's inevitably a dogfight, and you're saying to yourself, is that the same Max Johnson? Yes, it is the same Max Johnson. There is not 2 lefty Max Johnsons. Come on, you need to know this. But when you turn on that game and Clemson is in a dogfight against Georgia Southern, remember that is the LSU, UNC, Texas A&M,
yeah,
Max Johnson. It is no, not Auburn. No, not Auburn. That was his brother. His brother's at Auburn now. Sorry, I'm getting the Johnsons. But that is the same dude. Oh, God.
Finley. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, if Dabo in year 18 loses to LSU and then loses to Georgia Southern, which I think that game's week 3, that conversation would happen, though. It absolutely would. I do wonder if Dabo would do like the coach the remainder of the season type thing. You're fired, but you can be your own interim coach, because that seems like the type of thing that you would really enjoy.
Interim coach Dabo would be so fire. He would be just trying.
I need interim Dabo.
Yes,
oh, that'd be great.
Him and Chad Morris, just like an Adam Sandler buddy comedy, just like, hey, run another flea flicker.
Chad Morris looking just like he's at an absolute loss for words on the sideline this year. I need that. Plus Dabo as an interim coach. That's the Clemson parlay. That's the only Clemson parlay I care about this year. All right. Chris asked a question. He says, what if Josh Heupel told the NCAA to kick rocks and let Arion Carter play? Does the NCAA have any teeth left after the last time UT's legal team kicked them in? I've wondered about this question a lot, Will. If you recall, something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Tennessee's captain suspended 2 games for accepting a $427 flight during the pre-draft process, which he reportedly paid back. The NCAA then suspended him 2 games. Josh Heupel called it BS. It's significant because Tennessee has to travel to face Georgia Tech in week 2. Here's what I wonder. So we've got all this stuff about the temporary restraining order for the class of 2022 guys. How does it work with those guys definitely having accepted flights? Obviously, the NCAA, if they have a restraining order against them, they can't come in and rule anything. And maybe today's development kind of changes the conversation with those class of 2022 guys who have obviously accepted stuff like that in the past and probably not paid it back, because why wouldn't you? Why would you have to do something like that? But I wonder if Tennessee had kind of waited for that to play out before taking real action. Because if they had just acted immediately after this ruling to Arion Carter, I believe I had the timeline correct. It would have been before all of this 2022 stuff kind of came to light and was taken to court everywhere. Now, though, maybe you have a real argument if you're Tennessee. And I know some people might be going, well, what's the real risk in playing the guy? Who cares? Just go out there and see what the NCAA does. I get the NCAA doesn't control the postseason anymore. You could potentially have them trying to vacate wins. I'm sure they would try and just vacate Tennessee's entire season, knowing how they've tried to go after Tennessee since Tennessee went after them. That's a lot for one player. Granted, it's the SEC's tackling leader in what could be a pretty pivotal game for Josh Heupel. So I'll say it's a greater than 0% chance that it happens, that Tennessee will just dare the NCAA to take action, as they're just stacked sky high with legal issues right now they're facing from everywhere else. And they could just essentially force the NCAA to be like, you're either going to act now and we're going to have a real ruling on this and we're going to get some real clarity, or we're just going to play our guy and we don't care. It could happen.
Yeah. I think that the NCAA might be, you could say, blind squirrel finds a nut with this kind of striking down the overarching 22 thing to the states. That might actually be the first time they've had any type of influence in, like, I don't know, since the Ed O'Bannon case. But that being said, I was making this point, kind of came up with this take the other day. I was talking to John about F1, and just stick with me here. I was talking about in Monaco, the race that we went to, there was 9 drivers who got a penalty for speeding into pit lane. And what they found out was they mismeasured the distance of pit lane, and we're actually using a formula to see how fast they were going. They weren't actually checking their speed. They were saying you traveled this amount of distance in this amount of time, so you must have been speeding. Well, one of the numbers was wrong. So 9 cars served a penalty. Well, 1 car of those 9 didn't serve the penalty. He was like, you're wrong. I'm right. I'm going to keep racing. Catch me later. And guess what happened? He appealed, and it got upheld, and he got to just shoot past all these other guys who sat there in pit lane for 10 seconds, served their penalty, and tried to follow the rules. So I say that to say the law always favors the aggressor. I'd say 90% of the time in modern sports. If you just say, hey, I'm going to play this guy, come shoot me, come take me to jail, come burn my stadium down, whatever you think you can do, I got lawyers, you got lawyers, let's go to war. It seems like that is the way to do it now, versus back in the day, it was like, oh, this is all hush hush. Let's not bring any smoke. Let's all keep this. I mean, it goes back to the stuff with Fulmer back in the day, ratting people out and oh, you shouldn't do that. That's immoral. Whereas everybody was cheating, but everybody was being quiet. Now it's the opposite. It's be brash with it. Tell them, hey, why is this illegal? Show me where it says I can't do this. And often it was a lot of unwritten rules that were keeping these sports together. We're learning.
There's the Georgia Tech element to this too. How would Georgia Tech respond if they took the field and they go, wait a minute, that's Arion Carter out there. That guy's suspended for 2 games. Granted, by that point, I assume he would have already played in the first game. So they would be tipped. And there's an inactive list and stuff like that. So they're finding this information out before that. Okay. But what stance would Brent Key take? Would he look at Tennessee and go, well, we'll just not play? Well, if you're going to play a suspended guy, we'll just not play, and we'll see who wins this argument. I don't know. And he's also the type of head coach where he could just say, screw it. We got pads on. Let's play football. I don't care.
Full team protest would be so electric, or at least some coordinated shirts. Really just make this lawyer versus lawyer on a gridiron. Just get your best 11 lawyers. We're going to get ours, and we're just going to run the shotgun. Let's figure it out.
Georgia Tech has we heart the NCAA t-shirts that they wear in warmups.
It's anti-Boz. They're we love NCUSA.
Judge, jury, executioner equals NCAA.
There you go.
All right, Derek asked the question, can we just do away with week 0? It's week 1. Even though the majority of the sport isn't playing, it's still week 1. I've been pretty vocal about this. I would rather just have it be called week 0 than have 90% of the sport beginning of their season in what we would call week 2. What's the less confusing alternative? This is the less confusing alternative. My initial thought with this was, why can't we just call all of it week 1? But then what if a team that's playing both in week 0 and week 1, what do we call? They can't have 2 week 1 games. That would at least make more sense than what the bowl games try and do, Where like if you play the Citrus Bowl, like they'll say like the 2025 Citrus Bowl because it's played on January 1st, 2025. But then again, it's the 2025 Citrus Bowl because it's played the following season on December 31st, 2025. I hate that. When bowl games do that, I want to walk right up to the bowl executive and say, you are dumb and you're making this country dumber by what you're doing. We know we don't just tell us what season it's a part of. You know, we'll figure out what year it is. All right. Don't worry about that. We'll figure that out. Okay. Dumb.
Yeah. I
Week
mean,
one.
you know, it reminds me of like a zero period in school. Like when I was a senior, if you had all your credits, you could take a zero period and get out of class at like 2 p.m. or whatever. It was like an extra period, and that's how it felt. I think
Oh,
I
we
actually
didn't call it that. I don't remember that.
yeah, well, it may just be a Hoover thing because the thing about Hoover is they had so many people and a lot of them drove too, so it was almost kind of trying to like spread out the carpool situation. So that being said, like I actually kind of think this part they nailed because it's like, oh yeah, like even a week zero game sounds zany. You know, it's like, oh, they had a really big performance in week zero. It's like, did they? Like, did it really matter that much? So I think as long as we're kind of treating it like, oh, we're gonna play this game at bars, we're gonna play this game over here, it's gonna be this team versus this team that are like, you know, power or core four competition, then I actually kind of like week zero the way it's set up.
It's fine. It's fine. And maybe you just get everybody to play earlier in the season. That's the real solution to all this. Everybody should be playing in mid-August. You know, that's what all this comes down to. But like you said, go into it with the right mindset. It's the appetizer. It's not the entree. All right. If you go into it with the entree and you're like, why the season hasn't started yet? That's why we call week zero. Because week one is when the actual season starts.
It's like Vegas. If you lose week zero, it doesn't count. All right. You just start over week
Exactly.
one.
Exactly. Love that. Tyler, our future Nashville tour guide, has a couple of takes that he wanted to throw at us. He said FSU's snub for the playoffs. It's still mentioned on podcasts and seems like those still bringing it up. He's talking about 2023. Only focus on the undefeated record and nothing else. Arguably, Georgia had a stronger case, but just lost to Bama in the SEC championship. I put some numbers together from that season for Texas, Georgia, Florida State, and Bama. No Washington or Michigan since they were also undefeated going into the 4-team playoff. The numbers that he put up, Georgia, Bama, and Texas all had 5 wins against AP top 25 teams pre-playoff. FSU only had 3. And the strength of schedule before the playoff based on teamrankings.com had Bama at 1, Georgia at 5, Texas at 6, and FSU at 15. I get what he's saying. I also get that the selection committee did not care about any of those numbers, and all they cared about was how Florida State looked in 2.5 games without Jordan Travis, and it was not good. And it turns out FSU is just a tough watch in general without Jordan Travis, so it wasn't just exclusive to those 2.5 games. But
yeah, I'm glad you clarified which year they were left out. I think there was only one year they were even close.
yeah, people would have picked up on that. But I could debate this metric versus that metric. None of it mattered to them. They did not care. Okay, they did not care, and that's the only thing that it came down to. If Jordan Travis were out there on 1 foot, they still would have probably put FSU in the college football playoff because they were undefeated. Like that's a tough thing for people to hear. They were also, and this is the context that we need to go back to in 2023. The college football playoff had been, I think, trying to not let past results dictate future decisions, but they were on the heels of a 65-7 national championship, and they were very desperate to avoid more non-competitive playoff games. And to that point, they had seen a lot of non-competitive playoff games. The semifinals, mostly duds. Very few instant classics like the 2017 Rose Bowl. Like games like that were few and far between to that point. What we ended up getting was 2 down-to-the-wire playoff games in the semifinals between Bama and Michigan and Texas and Washington. So they probably felt justified in that, looking back on it. Every single fan base in America would have felt exactly how Florida State fans felt when they got left out of the playoff. Okay. And you cannot convince me otherwise. We still to this day talk about 2004 Auburn, even though Auburn didn't make the national championship game because there were 2 other undefeated teams. Okay. And I think Auburn would have had a really good chance to be able to win a national championship had it been allowed to play in the BCS national championship. And it's unfortunate, but we're obviously still going to be talking about Florida State. So, like, if someone wants to say Florida State was a snub, I'm not going to push back on that. Maybe it's Bud Elliott that's saying these things in his totally unbiased opinion. I don't know. Maybe it's Danny Cannell saying these things in his totally unbiased opinion. I don't know. But I'm not going to be the person to push back on FSU as a snub because every single fan base would be like, yep, we got robbed. We were undefeated and we couldn't make the 4-team playoff, much less, trying to make the national championship's a different story, but the 4-team playoff and you couldn't even get one of those spots.
Yeah, this is, I think, the thing that we probably historically disagreed on the most. This is an incredible cornucopia of questions so far because it's like, how do you feel about these issues? And so I'll just bring this one up because his thing was about Georgia, right? And what I said at the time was, hey, it's hard to sell me. Like most of the Georgia fan conspiracy stuff, I'm like, all right, you guys are like, take your tinfoil hats off. But it's hard to sell me another situation where a team is a 2-time defending national champion and they get left out in a situation like that. And I think the cheapening of conference championship games since then, that was the last conference championship game that mattered. And at the time, it was like, oh, of course, they lost the conference championship. They can't get in. So, like, that would be my only new take on this situation is if we had gone to a model where it was like, yeah, Georgia lost, they can't get in, I would get it. But every piece of data since then has said, and of course, I would leave out Texas in that situation, right? I hate to say it, but I mean, it is what it is. And I think that Georgia should have played for a chance to defend what they had. I think that if they had, somehow missed and they're undefeated, so it's like, okay, yeah, let's say they lose an earlier game and they miss the SEC championship game, they easily make the playoff, I think, right? And so that being said,
I agree.
Yeah, so like I think that was the last one of those games that matters. So has that changed your take at all?
No. Everybody knew Georgia when they lost that game, they were not making the playoff. And I'm not saying that is totally fair. They lost the most pivotal pre-playoff game that any team has lost because I think we all look back on that 2023 Georgia team and go, yeah, they could have won a national championship. And in another world, in most other 4-team playoffs, they would have been in the field and they probably would have been the favorite to be able to win. And maybe it wouldn't have been Michigan that won a national championship when we know how that played out a couple years earlier and Georgia blew them off the field. Granted, a more experienced Michigan team, but I don't know that I can use the way that it's played out since then and knowing like, oh, well, that's the last meaningful conference championship game and use that to justify FSU getting snubbed as opposed to Georgia getting snubbed.
Georgia. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I still would have had a FSU in the field and I still do think it was a snub, but that just is what it is.
This is it's a famous example of split the baby. It's like almost nobody was happy with Texas because people had FSU arguments, they had Georgia arguments. But to your point, really gripping series of playoff games. So again, we kind of go back and play the results there as well.
Texas beat Bama, Georgia didn't. Texas beat Bama in Tuscaloosa. Georgia didn't beat Bama in Atlanta. Like that's tough. That's brutal. I hate it. One interesting thought, this is also from our guy Tyler. He says, one interesting thought I've always wondered about is the SEC butterfly effect of Tebow signing with Florida instead of Alabama. I by no means wish this happened, but consider it a fascinating thought experiment. If Tebow would have signed with Alabama, I wonder how that would have impacted their season. 4 of 6 losses were one-score games in the career of Mike Shula. Yes, they vacated wins based on NCAA investigation, but if Tebow and Shula showed promise, would that have changed college football history by them sticking with Shula and not hiring Saban? On the Florida side, Tebow was clearly instrumental in the 2006 national championship run, but if he wasn't the clear starter in 2007, there would have been a freshman named Cam Newton that arguably could have run the Urban Meyer offense even better. Again, I love Tebow in Florida, but Newton was better passer and a faster runner. Tebow is unquestionably one of the greatest team leaders in the history of college football. I regularly have Tennessee fans tell me how much they hated playing him, but if they had to start a college football franchise, they'd want Tebow as their team captain. Keep up the great work. Happy to hear you're back 2 pods a week from Tyler. Okay. A lot to unpack there. The Tebow sliding doors at Bama. You'll remember this locally a little bit more than I will. It would mean that he would have gotten there in 2006, aka the final year of Mike Shula in Tuscaloosa, of course, the last year of the pre-Saban era. That was a weird way for me to phrase it. What never gets discussed is that Shula, going into 2006, was coming off of a 10-2 season at Alabama. Bama had the number 1 scoring offense in America in 2005. Okay. So Bama finished 8th in the AP poll and then was unranked going into 2006. Like that's insane to look back on. That does not happen. That's how much turnover that they had on that roster going into 2006. That included new starting quarterback, moving on from Brody Croyle. John Parker Wilson was the new starter. He was kind of the next man up in that room. Hoover High legend.
Good books.
That's right. I don't think Bama was going to bust out a 2-quarterback system in the way that Florida did in 2006. Okay. And I know that we talked about this when Swamp Kings came out. Chris Leak gets so disrespected for how he approached that as the incumbent starter to play well enough and then not let it divide the locker room, that Tebow would basically come in as like a red zone guy or like a get the ground game going type guy in that offense. So I don't think that Tebow ends up being this Shula era savior who prevents Saban from coming to Alabama, because John Parker Wilson started every game that season and he wasn't going anywhere when Saban arrived because, like, duh, why would you be going somewhere? I think it's more likely that Tebow would have transferred from Alabama than John Parker Wilson, if we're being 100% honest. That might sound like a crazy thought. Like, Tebow could have seen the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to really fit in the pro style scheme. Or alternatively, he could have done like the Kirk Herbstreit at Ohio State thing, which was stay because you love the school, even though you're a terrible fit in this scheme. There's a chance that if Tebow goes to Bama to start off his college career, that it's just a square peg in a round hole. And then when he finally gets his opportunity in 2009, when he would have been a redshirt junior, it's just not the Tebow that we came to know and love. And maybe the system doesn't necessarily yield that. So I don't know how much it changes the Bama era that much. Okay. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, I'll say it to you like this. I thought to myself, okay, wow, there are a lot of great athletes on that team. You know, you had like like what would Mike Shula have done with Tim Tebow? And then I just remembered 20 years later, we just saw him with Lenore Sellers. It was a disaster. Now, has he gotten dumber in those 20 years? Because I was like, this giant athletic quarterback. He's 18. It wasn't like he was, like a grown Lenore Sellers. And even with that, it couldn't move the ball down the field. So, like, I think he probably just misuses him, right? I think that the way that they use Tebow was just one of the most hand-in-glove fits ever in the history of college football. That is not taking into account the John Parker Wilson part of it, which I think is a big deal. He was exactly the type of guy that, fit the system, hometown kid. And again, to your point, Saban stuck with him. He was just what they needed at that point in time, especially with the emergence of a true number one like Julio Jones. I think both of those teams just ended up in a great spot.
Julio doesn't get there until 2008. Worth remembering.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying, like, in terms of like what they needed, like, he was probably used to recruit Julio. Like, it was like we're building a pro style system, not a spread option.
Yeah. The Cam part is fascinating, though. You've heard Dan Mullen say on this show, and as Tyler brought up, like, even when Tebow was coming off the Heisman season in 2007, and Dan Mullen's going, Cam's the guy. Like, Cam's even better than Tebow. And he would tell it to Urban, and Urban would get pissed off. Like, Florida would not have won. I don't think Florida would have won the national title in 2006 without Tebow. I really think they needed him. Their margin for error was not as great that year, and they needed exactly what Tebow brought. That's why they were willing to roll the dice on a true freshman playing in a game. He had that type of impact. I still think Florida would have been really good. I mean, the defense was nasty. They're probably more like a 10-2 team that plays in like a BCS bowl game as opposed to the BCS national championship. So then when Leak is gone after 2006, it's like going into 2007, we're talking about. Even if Tebow had decided to turn down Nick Saban and then transfer to Florida in 2007, he would have sat that year. He would have been a redshirt. Okay. So no 2007 Tebow Heisman season we're talking about. Urban then would have a quarterback battle going into 2007 full of underclassmen quarterbacks, just loaded with underclassmen quarterbacks, includes John Brantley as well. I think Cam wins that job as a true freshman and takes off. I do. I really do. The issue being,
but does he take off with a laptop?
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't, Will. And that's the other sliding doors. He never ends up at Auburn. He doesn't have the need to go and do that because he's getting taken care of. And they're working all that stuff out on the side. He doesn't need laptops and stuff.
So this is a sliding glass door that robs us of like 4 great SEC
Oh, yeah. The entire decade of dominance. Well, I shouldn't say that. We still get Bama.
Did Joel Klatt write this?
There. No. But it does I think it does change the future of many SEC teams at that point. Okay. 2007 Florida, though, if you recall, defense was not good. Tebow won the Heisman that year, and they went 9-4. Like,
shout out Jacob Hester.
Right. Of course. Who could forget? So even if Cam had been Cam from the jump and it was just awesome, again, I'm not saying he's 2010 Cam from the jump 2007. Okay. That's unfair to say. We don't compare anyone to college Cam Newton, even freshman Cam Newton. We don't do that. Okay. We can't. But if that happens, and if Cam is just really good, it's like, Urban, you got something. You really have something. But you're not winning a national championship, and you're probably like an 8-4 type team, something like that in the regular season. Is Urban on the hot seat going into 2008? And then it probably all clicks for Florida, and then they win a national championship with Cam in 2008. Tebow, like maybe Cam goes off to the NFL like post 2009, actually, because that's when he would have been draft eligible. And then all of a sudden, Urban can then turn to Tebow as the replacement, as the heir apparent to Cam Newton. And then the Urban era maybe looks a little bit different, knowing that he's got Tebow waiting in the wings.
Yeah, no, I think what would be really fun. What if we're just like saying stuff? I think he's a little bit closer to Alabama, but I wonder if Tebow looked at Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. That would have been really fun if he came in during those like kind of like run and shoot option teams. I'm wondering who would have really benefited from his style, but they had some guys too. So yeah, that was definitely like the bifurcation of college football. Like you either had a running quarterback or you had a throwing quarterback. We've seen that, and it just meant more.
And Rich Rod ending up at Michigan and picking Tate Forcier over Ryan Mallett was the guy that was married to his system, and seeing what that recruiting pitch could have looked like either at West Virginia or at Michigan to Tebow would have been a fun one. Like, man, you thought Pat White was good, buddy. Wait till you see yourself in our offense. That would have been fun to see. Okay. Love that, by the way. Our guy, Gary Joe Collins. He says, "Gentlemen, I really enjoy the show. Look forward to getting into it each week and trying to get ready for another season of SEC football. The only problem with football season is it goes by way too fast, like the last chicken leg at a Baptist potluck. Do with that what you will. I'll weigh in with caffeine, then get into what I came here for. I usually have an energy drink of the morning. Well, you're going to have to help me out with this pronunciation. An Alanu Hawaiian shaved ice. That's a
That's
thing?
new. That's game right
Okay.
there.
Okay. Or a pink
Alan, I
slush.
knew. Okay, I'm gonna have to check
Alan I
that
knew.
out.
All right. Shout out Alan I knew. They're probably girly too, but we're not going there. And then usually a shot of pre-workout before my exercise. I try to get the caffeine shut down by 7 p.m. because if I go later, it messes up my sleep schedule. And late caffeine, with the fact that I am firmly a middle-aged man, 46, I'm a man, I'm 40, and then some. I am up at odd hours of the night. Anyway, the meat and potatoes. Two things I've mulled over and I want your expert inputs on. Choose one or do both. We're going to do both, but a modified version. Number one, each SEC coach's disaster scenario for the next 3 years. I mean, what will get them unhired at the end of a season for any time in the next 3 years? So Gary did all of them, by the way, did all of them. We will not on the, we'll try and just cut this down a little bit. We're not going to go through all 16 of them just because we only have so much time here today. But
He's like, here's a free show rundown, and thank you for that.
we could have. And Gary, thank you. We really could have. But these are the ones that I found most interesting that that Gary highlighted here. So Arkansas with Ryan Silverfield. He says, honestly, brand new staff. I think they've got a 2-year runway to get something started, maybe a completely winless season, 0-12, as in like that would be what could get him fired. It's definitely a 2-year runway. It's funny because we shouldn't probably be talking about what it would take to get a new coach fired before they've ever coached a game, but that's college football. That's what we do.
Ryan Silver just have the worst time for a new coach in SEC history. People are just laughing at him. All the quotes that are coming out are like, he has no aura. We're like, what if we fire him in year one?
Yeah, Ryan Silverfield needs to win an SEC game year one just to get the aura stuff away from the conversation. So in baseball, we have the Mendoza line. It's a batting average of 200. Okay. It is a line that if you're not hitting above the Mendoza line, you're in trouble. You're talking minor leagues very, very soon. That's the consensus thought with the Mendoza line in baseball.
The
In college football. Line. Say it again.
Oh, what's his name? Kyle Tucker, the dude who's just being terrible at the Dodgers right now. Anyway.
Who would have ever paid Kyle Tucker all that money? Not my franchise. In college football, we should have the Morris line. That's right, the Chad. If in year 2, you still can't win a conference game and you've lost at least one game to a non-power conference team, that is the Morris line. And you should be automatically fired with only 50% of your buyout. Let's get behind that. The Morris line. Okay. That needs to exist. And it's probably worth remembering with Ryan Silverfield as he tries to avoid what Chad Morris did 2018, 2019. But if you're a college football coach, I don't want to hear you need 4 years. If you can't compete above the Morris line, you're done. You're cooked. On to the next job.
Lebby, you're flirting with it. You're flirting with it. You're not there. You're a bounce or two away, though.
He won an SEC game, Arkansas. He won another power conference game. He did suffer in year 1 the non-power conference loss to, what was it, Toledo, I believe. Yeah, he would have been close, but he's still above it. He's still
Thanks
above
to Arkansas. Yeah, that's the ultimate irony. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been. Oof. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I fully agree. I think that's the exact line. I think we're one game away from that with Lebby. I think we've just determined it.
Yeah. And I'm not a believer anymore of like you automatically need 3 years, because if you can't do those things for 2 years, you're not the guy. I'm sorry. You're just not. Okay. Gary has for Ole Miss, if they get trashed by LSU in the breakup bowl and limp to a 4-8 or 5-7 campaign, I could see things getting warm in Oxford. I think Golding gets 3 years to build on what the last guy left. Okay. I'm on the record saying I am very much in the Pete Golding will not crumble in 2026 camp. I've picked Ole Miss to reach the SEC championship this year. But, Will, if I told you, I'll give you 20-1 odds on your money that Pete Golding would be fired at season's end, would that be enticing enough to you?
No. I am a structural generational hater. See, you got to have the pride before the fall. He can't just come out and, as tempting as it is, the game against Louisville and Nashville that we've been talking about, I think you got to have the one season you can play off, one season where it's like, we might win this breakup. The Les Miles season at LSU, where you're like, wow, he might have gotten the better coach here. Year 2 is where I'm really licking the chops. All right. I've said nothing but positive things about Ole Miss this year.
50-1. No.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody's got a price. But it is, it is worth noting. We did already see a defensive-minded coach in the state of Mississippi essentially bypass the interim tag, get the head job, and last exactly 1 year. And I do think this situation is obviously very different than the one Zach Arnett inherited because of the breakup factor alone. I also think Pete Golding isn't trying to change the offense in the way that Zach Arnett did post air raid, Mike Leach, all that. Mississippi State was always going to be in a transition year in 2023. It's not a preseason top 10 team like what Ole Miss has this year with Trinidad Chambliss. Also, I had kind of forgotten about the timeline of this. A month before Leach died, John Cohen left Mississippi State for Auburn. So you had Zach Arnett was essentially hired by a staff in transition, and then Zach Selman was hired after Zach Arnett had already gotten the full-time job, which I'm sure sent his antenna up of like, I got to impress this guy or else this could be curtains. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But yeah, I would tend to say that Ole Miss going into 2026, just a little bit more stability than what Mississippi State had circa 2023. But if you told me that Ole Miss was 4-8, 5-7, I'd say yes, Keith Carter making a change and they're going to test the open market. But it would probably also have to include like another off the field, not so flattering mugshot of one Pete Golding. That's included. That's baked into a potential 4-8 season.
Yeah, I don't think he could do the PR thing about being like, oh, I'm out in the community at 4-8. Like, it'd be something else. But that being said, I talked about Oklahoma earlier, caring about perception. I think Ole Miss is right there, which is why it's hard to sell me the after year 1 thing, where it's like, we got all these losers from Lane Kiffin's time in here. That's why Pete Golding won 4 games in year 1. I think he's locked in. Like, I think they've built so many graphics and things for him that it would take an abject, like, off the field stuff for him to get fired after year 1.
I agree with that. Let's end with this guy. This one from our guy, Gary Joe. He says, if you have to take a cross-country flight with no headphones and no other distractions, but you have to sit between the football coach and men's basketball coach of one SEC school, who would you choose? I think this is as easy a question as I've ever come up with. It's Kiffin and Will Wade. The stories that those two could tell would be absolutely epic. Plus, they're just full of it. They're full of it just enough to keep you guessing on what's hot air and what's factual. Rick Barnes and Josh Heupel would probably be a lot of fun. Their personalities are different enough to not clash, but keep things interesting. Clark Lee, and you'd have Byington for Vandy. Wouldn't be as much a conversation, but a high level discussion on market volatility and stock yields. Both of those guys strike me as very intelligent. I'd be remiss not to mention Pope and Stein. Could be a lot of fun, as both guys have deep ties to the university. So I'd feel like I was among more of my own than with the others. Gary, by the way, big Kentucky fan. I'm looking forward to your responses in the show. You two are among the best in the business, and thanks for always being pros and approachable at the same time. You're awesome. Godspeed, Gary Joe Collins. Thank you, Gary Joe. He's right. Not to just take the easy way out here. Kiffin and Wade it's the best answer if you're just going to sit back and let them cook and you're like, I don't need to be part of this conversation. I'm good. That is the right answer. If I'm trying to not be involved in let me rephrase that. If I do care about my involvement in the conversation, I want to have input. I want to have good back and forth. I want that time on the flight to just kind of fly by and feel like I'm actually making friends with these people here. I think for me personally, this is an unpopular answer. I would get along well with Golish and Stephen Pearl. I would. All three of us, similar hairstyles.
I was going to say, you guys talking moose? What are we talking?
Yeah. Within a few years of age of one another, I would get Moscow stories from Golish, and I'd really just the whole Stephen Pearl angle would be entirely, I want him to make fun of his dad the whole time. And I would just ask him questions to try and make fun of his dad more than anything else. So that would be fun. But yeah, that would be the direction I would go if I actually wanted to be an active member of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Auburn thing, you couldn't, talk politics at all, get really dicey. No, that being said, I
don't know that that trickles down in the same sort of way though, where he feels as strongly as Bruce does about that. Like I obviously I'm not getting onto a flight to talk politics with anybody. I don't care. But like I don't know that would be the case. Like Bruce has been so much more out there with that. So I don't know. I don't want to assume that that's a given with Steven as well.
Dude, I think it's Kentucky by a mile. I'm cooking up parlays with Stein and Pope. Pope is like the most fun guy in the SEC. You think about the fact that he's like 7 feet tall and how funny that would be. Like he's like be cramped in the seat like this. You keep going like, oh, sorry. He's already said like enough insane stuff in this time there that like, like I'm a bigger guy. He'd be feeling uncomfortable. We'd be joking about the whole time. Stein, we know is a dude who could talk about music and everything. I think in terms of like a funny like conversation where there would be no awkward pauses, I think like that's alone in the A tier. I think that Kiffin and Wade, I would see myself too much in them. They're both kind of a version of me. And so I think that also I think Lane online is a little bit funnier than in person, maybe like myself as well.
100% right.
And so like I think Lane might make it a little bit awkward. Like I think he wouldn't be as off the cuff. Whereas like so I'd probably find myself talking to Will Wade, who is a little bit awkward as well. Again, maybe like myself. And whereas like Stein and Pope, I'm just like doing bleep, marry, kill. We're cooking up parlays. We're talking about bands. Like nothing's off the table with those lads.
Will Wade, the first thing that he says to you, you wearing a wire? You good? You straight?
Yeah, we would just make fun of Will Wade for getting caught the whole time. That's the thing. Yeah, you're like, how did you get caught by the NCAA? You were the last person to do that.
Congratulations, man. I think Ole Miss would be pretty good too. Golding would have Saban stories. And he'd let him rip. There's no doubt about it. That'd be
bar.
Really
those two are electric at Ole Miss.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris Beard too. I mean, some different stories that Chris Beard would get, but so I could make the case for a lot of these as the ones I would most like in terms of like where I would want to be sitting between. There's an easy last place for me.
Who's that? That's what I was going to ask you. Who's that?
Texas is last. I've got to deal with Sean Miller sweating all over me. And then Sark jumping down my throat if I even say anything that starts with the letter A or that rhymes with arch. I'm not dealing with that. No way. Too intense. I'd be afraid to say the wrong thing the whole time. I think Florida would kind of be a little bit similar with Golden and Sumrall. Like Golden seems like a big flight complainer. Everything's always wrong. And maybe I'm just basing that on how he's got a little bit of early onset Hurley in him. With how he complains to officials and stuff. But he'd be like, the vents aren't blowing enough, seat not comfortable enough. And then Sumrall is just kind of too amped to sit still. And you never want to sit next to that person on a flight either. Like, can you just
he's like grabbing something from his bag the entire flight. Like he's just knocking into stuff. Sorry. Like
Yeah.
with Ole Miss in Florida, I'm talking to the football coach pretty much the entire time.
Yeah. We're just focused right here. Folks right here, not over here. But yeah, Texas is the easy last place one.
Bama is sneaky kind of rough too. I think sitting next to Dabo on a flight would be so rough. It's like, hey, you going family or business? Well, when you're a college football coach, family and business is really intertwined. So sometimes it's family, sometimes it's business. It's like, all right, bro.
Counterpoint though. When you get on a flight, your mood can dictate a lot of things. Sometimes you get on a flight and you feel good and you've got energy. And maybe you strike up a little small talk with the person that's sitting next to you, and you're in a good mood for that. If you're sitting next to Kalen DeBoer, you don't have to worry about the alternative, which is you're sitting next to the person that's just going to talk your ear off the whole time, and you don't want to be in that spot. When you don't want that person to talk your ear off and they still are, it's the absolute worst. I would never think that Kalen DeBoer would be in that camp of a guy who would do that. So there's at least that. Again, he would not be my first choice for this, but I don't think Bama would quite be my last. Maybe Nate Oates is probably more for that guy. Maybe. Could be.
I think too with Kentucky, I think myself and Stein are like probably very good at traveling, whereas I feel like we'd be giving Pope crap about traveling because like I'm sure he doesn't fly regular a lot.
What are you talking about? He's a coach that recruits nationally.
Yeah,
of course
I
he
guess
flies a ton.
I guess they don't take out like a charter plane for everything. That's a good point. But like, and I'm assuming, I guess I would be in coach for this. I'm a regular. I'm an everyman. So maybe in first class that makes things a little bit. Sitting next to Pope and coach would be such comedy. I'm just so stuck on that.
Yeah. And no disrespect to any of our Haas head coaches. I'm sitting middle no matter what. I'd like to be comfortable. There's a few that are not making the cut. Mississippi State, I'm sorry. It's no disrespect. I'm sure Levy's a great conversation. I'm sure Chris Jan's great conversation. I'm the little guy. I'm not getting an armrest in that spot. If I'm just speaking strictly out of personal comfort, I have to consider that. I have to.
Me and Kirby are doing war crimes with those free peanuts. Like we're killing 20 free peanuts between me and Kirby.
Do they still do peanuts? I feel like peanuts haven't been brought on a flight in forever because of the allergy thing.
Yeah, that's also a good point. I don't know, dude. I flew KLM, the Dutch one, when I was overseas. They give you a free range little sandwich that was like made by a little family. It's like our flight situation is so much worse, man. We can't even have peanuts anymore.
International flight, the food is so underrated. When we flew to Europe, because we flew into Dublin, actually, aforementioned Dublin, and 3 meals, all really solid. I think airplane food and hospital food are so wildly misinterpreted. And maybe I'm just basing that too much off of my limited experiences in both. But like any parents out there that have done like the overnight thing in a hospital you've inevitably paid a lot of money for these meals that you're getting by staying in the hospital for multiple days. But you're like, this food ain't bad. I don't think that's just our hospital either. Like I've heard that from other parents who are like, yeah, 3 meals that we got were actually pretty good.
See, that's why I mess with you. You're like anti-Jerry Seinfeld. You're like, what's kind of underrated? Airline food.
You know who's actually got a purpose on this earth is the HOA.
Sometimes people's yard is kind of crazy. All right? You gotta say it. Can't just be having stuff out there.
We can't just be having things grow up, knee high before 4th of July. That works with corn in the Midwest. It doesn't work with your grass in August, buddy. All right, let's take it easy. All right, great questions, great discussion topics. Thank you to everybody who emailed us, the ogkickoff@gmail.com. We'd still love to be able to hear from you. Please email us. Lead with your caffeine choices there. All right, let's kick it to Peter Burns. Always love chopping it up with PB. Great conversation as always. So here is Peter Burns. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is the one and only Peter Burns. PB, it's great to see you. It's great to see you here and not on the Bird app where people are trying to dunk on you. Can you tell the full story of what I'm referring to? Because if you do, I promise there will be a compliment waiting for you at the end of it.
Well, again, I don't know if there'll be a compliment, but I'm not used to ever getting compliments on anything, much less the Bird app over on Twitter. So I assume what you're referring to is the first time I've ever gotten community noted over on social media, which is a badge of honor. Like I've done freezing cold takes. I made the book like that. That's low hanging fruit, right? See it? Yeah. Fred's book is fantastic. Made it a couple of times, saw your name in there as well too. So it's like band of brothers here if you had a freezing cold take. But community noted is in a different level. And so what's funny is I'm getting ready to hop in to go get a haircut, and I see that the coaches poll has come out, right? So I'm like, all right, well, I take a look at it. Coaches poll, as we all know, aren't really voted on by the coaches, right? It's normally an
SIDs.
SID, right, who fills it out. It's not a big deal. So whatever. And I look at it and I'm like, and I go, you know what? I threw it into AI real quick and I go, hey, do me a favor. Like cross-reference every single one of these schools right now. And how many other top 25 teams do they each play? Right. So I wanted to do the idea of like, all right, without biasing it and going, hey, the SEC clearly has a schedule. Give me a rundown. Right. So it runs it, and then I roll back again. I go double check, make sure these are buttoned up, ready to go, and they're yes. Here is what the cross-reference schedules for the 2026. Big Ten has these amount of other teams listed on this graphic. SEC has this amount of teams. So I'm like, we've double checked it, we've done it, put it out in the ether. Then I go like on vacation for like 48 hours, and I get back, and my phone has. It's on fire. It's like 4,000 mentions and like community noted. Hatred. And I'm used to that stuff, especially from Big Ten folks. Right. And I started looking at it going, oh, okay. And it actually came at a perfect time where I had just gotten the book from Freezing Cold Takes. So I was like, well, speaking of Freezing Cold Takes, Fred's got a new book out. So, yeah, a good lesson about how good AI can be in certain different ways is a good lesson of like, we're not quite there yet, Elon.
Here's the compliment though. You left it up. You did not delete this tweet. It's up. You can go see on Peter Burns. Follow PB on Twitter if you don't already and you're somehow listening to this and not having done that. But you can still see it and it's up there. And so many people, I myself included, I would have deleted it. I would have been horrified by the way that it played out. And instead, you leaving it up is the best way to be able to then own your mistake.
Well, again, like I get upset when people make mistakes and don't hold themselves accountable. And so, like, it would have been easy, kind of, like I said, delete it. But I'm like, you know what? That was an idiotic thing that I posted right there. So I need to own it. Like, I had no problem with it. So thank you for the compliment. Basically, your compliment, Connor, is going, hey, you were so incredibly wrong. I appreciate you showing the world how incredibly wrong you were. So, again, like, it's what you realize in this world. It's like, remember when Rebecca Black made it huge on that Friday song and everybody dunked on it, or like Nickelback? People were like, dude, this is terrible. And yet people knew all about it. Now it's got like 3 million views, and there's my claim to fame right there. So it's good.
You got others, but look, the three most underused words in the English language, I was wrong. And, not enough people are willing to do that. So credit to you.
I appreciate that. And again, like I would rather have a take and it be wrong and be like, I was wrong on that. And I think we would all be better off at doing that just a little bit more, like in life. Right.
Mhm.
Like, so the first thing, if somebody calls you out going, all right, well, let me hear the other side of it one way or another. Either you're talking about sports or politics or whatever it is. So I was wrong. I was glad that people posted it up, and I left it up there. So it's still trending.
Here's what we need to do. We need to have, whenever someone is mean to you on the formerly known as the Bird app, we need to have a clip where someone can push back and you're saying like really good things about the Big Ten or something like that. And then I can just drop that and say, no. PB is not being an SEC homer. I have this clip to show you that he is not an SEC homer. So can you provide some sort of thing that is either anti-SEC, pro Big Ten. You want to be pro Big 12, pro ACC?
I mean, again, you know what's so funny is going through this whole process and this whole off season is I've seen, like I try to get off a little bit more of social media than ever before because for just a very different reasons. It was so busy during the summer with the kiddos and stuff like that. And every time I would log in, it was just so toxic. And it was like hot take after hot take. And I know that, listen, that's the way Twitter has been. Hell, that was the way that I've, probably got to my position of where I was at for 10 plus years doing that. And I woke up one day and I was like, this is exhausting. Like it's the same garbage in, garbage out stuff every single day. And I'm like, all right, instead of kind of ripping, it's not like, are we going to get back to the world where it's not so hot takey and it's more storytelling? That's kind of what I hope for. So, or maybe it's the fact that I'm just getting old and hot takes are like a young man's game. And I just don't, I'm ready to retire and get out of the game at that point. Like, I just think there's so many cool stories to tell, even in the SEC world, the Big Ten world, that it's like, all right, the whole hot take shtick is, I don't know. It doesn't do me for it right now. Now, watch me in 3 weeks from now just rip the Big Ten if they have a huge, when Big Ten noon kickoff is at like Western Kentucky Tech versus, Indiana for their first game. But whatever.
Whoa. That's unnecessary.
National champion, Big Ten champion, Heisman Trophy winning Indiana.
Some are saying. many are saying.
Yeah, many are saying.
Okay.
Many are saying.
Okay, so you talk about the storytelling element. Really cool to see what you didn't, by the way, you didn't tell me to promote the Regions Bank stuff that you're doing. I would like to be able to do that because you're getting to do some cool storytelling with that, with meeting all these new SEC coaches and whatnot. And I've got to talk to you very briefly about this in Tampa, but I think it's kind of fascinating to be able to spend time with these guys behind the scenes. What did you and CD kind of take away from that experience, or maybe who changed? Like who did you spend a day with, and maybe your impression of them changed the most?
Yeah. So just real quick, genesis of how the whole thing came together is, we did a sit down with Coach Spurrier with Regions Bank last year, and it went really well. And we're like, man, we heard all these stories. So when we were going to come up with a new idea, we're like, well, there's all these brand new coaches in there. In the conference, I don't really know who a lot of these guys are. So we pitched the idea and they're like, yeah, let's do it. And when I went to every single coach, Connor, I said, here's the thing. I don't want to do it in your football facility. Right. Because you get the coach speak, you get the 2 chairs, it looks pretty, and it's just kind of garbage in, garbage out. I'm like, we'll do it, but we got to come to your home. Right. If Coach Spurrier is going to introduce me into his home, I think all these coaches can. And they all agreed. And so it was great about going to see Sumrall, Will Stein, Golis, Silverfield at Arkansas. I mean, like we show up at Ryan Silverfield's house, and literally the first part of it is I knock on the door and he's got a baby bottle in the hand. And he's like, shh, hey, don't knock. Like come to the back, side of the patio to come in because I've got 1.5-year-old girls, twins, and they're about ready for nap. And I think they might be napping. And I'm like, this is like, I would have never expected. I don't, in my mind and a lot of fans' minds, I don't know about you, but I just think a coach is a coach all year long and they don't have like a normal life. Right. And like, remember when you would see a teacher growing up in the grocery store and it rocked your world? You're like, wow, I thought you lived at the legitimate school. Like you're a human. Like, so that's kind of what we decided to do. And man, it's weird because not trying to carry water, but every single one of the coaches were so open and honest and transparent. I think a lot of that had to do because we were in their homes and had met their family, that you came away with a little bit of something different. Like I felt like every single school had grabbed a coach that they really needed. And that felt like a fit. Like Sumrall, I mean, he was first to admit it. He was like, hey, when I got the invite on a Zoom link with Scott Strickland, the AD, and Danny Werfel, I told my wife, I'm not getting the job, right? He goes, they just fired a group of 5 coach from the state of Louisiana. I am a group of 5 coach from the state of Louisiana. Ain't no way I'm getting the job, but I'll do the Zoom, right? And so he tells those stories. And then the more and more you spend time with Sumrall, you're like, I think this is exactly what they needed, right? Like football guy who's shown a lot of success, fired up, but also has a lot more, I don't know, forward going presence and aura about him than Billy Napier did. Right. So Will Stein, when I sat down with him, the first thing he wanted to do is play pickleball, which was wild. And so me and him played pickleball versus Doring and his wife, Darby, who's a great athlete. And by like the third match, we're tied up. We're down by like 7 points. He like rips me over. You can see it on the video, like rips me over my shirt. And he gives me a non-safe for work rah-rah speech. I didn't even know the cameras were rolling. And we come back and win. I'm like, dude, I kind of get why Will Stein has got this job at Kentucky. So again, kind of rambling here, but every single one of the coaches maybe understand like what that school needed at the time. I think they kind of got it in who they hired.
I think it is interesting, and why I've spent a lot of time this offseason talking about the ages of these new coaches is that I think they're wired a little bit differently than we're used to with the traditional SEC head coach hires. In the conference has gotten so much younger at the head coaching position that there's a little bit of humanity that's there in a way that makes them feel more approachable because they have to be. They just have to be. And it kind of speaks to the way that you guys went about this series. And, you talk about like Will Stein giving you the not safe for work pump up speech. CD or Pete Golding, the better cursor. And I'm not saying that those made the cuts. Those are for the outtakes. But those two, they can let it fly in ways that I don't think even like if you hear them fired up, I don't think the average person would realize that.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's, Doring on air and then the Doring that and we all love off air. I mean, there's probably a little bit of non-safe for work language. Okay. For Golding, it's just part of his norm. Like he's not trying. It's just like a word that if like we use the word or hum or something like that, like in our vocabulary, he's like, I mean, shit, we got to figure it out. I mean, like that word is not a curse word. It's just another like
It's a glue.
verb or adjective for him to start something, so it's not really performative. It's just kind of who he is. So I really came away impressed with Golding about how just transparent he is. I mean, even at SEC media days, right? Because I saw a side of him in Oxford where his guard was down and he's relaxed. And then I go to his first SEC media day speech and like, all right, well, are you going to be buttoned up? Are you nervous? Shit. I mean, he was who he was, and I think that's why a lot of people were fired up for him.
Yeah, that's what I've heard is that Pete needs to continue to be Pete. Like if he all of a sudden starts like it's one thing to get a haircut and get a closer shave or something like that, but he needs to be himself because it's what's gotten him to this place in his career. And obviously there are elements behind the scenes that like obviously he can't have run-ins with the law and stuff like that. Of course, everybody acknowledges that, but he needs to be who he is, and that's what's allowed him to get to this place at Ole Miss.
And I think real quick, I think more coaches, to your point, more coaches have asked for feedback to other coaches who either had success or did not have success. And I think everyone that I talked to, they said it's not going to be easy, but be yourself on how you got here. Yeah. And I think everybody has that idea when they come in, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, now I'm a coach. I got to do this, this, and this. And Pete is the absolute example of like, nothing has changed. The bank account has changed, but he's still the same dude. Now, the question is that changed 2 years from now? I don't know.
Yeah. I think Alex Golesh is another example of that. And speaking of guys who can curse pretty well, Golesh he could let it rip pretty well too. I love that you guys went fishing because nothing about his personality says that he would be a fishing guy. Like nothing. High motor guy, grew up in colder weather. I mean, literally was born in Moscow for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But yet I feel like you're about to tell me that he cooked a couple of Southern natives like you and CD, and he was like, he was just getting reel after reel and bite after bite. And you guys were just like, dang, like, how's this guy doing this?
That's part of it. And then even he's got the lingo down, but this is not something that he was like, hey, I'm a diehard bass fisherman. What I spin it forward for him was he would recognize, man, being a dad and being a coach is really, really hard. And he was like, how do I connect with my kids? Right. One way or another. Like, how do I stay true to my family? and connect. And I think that was part of, hey, his son's like fishing, so he's like, I'm all in. Like, let's go. Let's do it. Let's get a house that has a little pond in the backyard, and that's something that we can get away. And then even the players come over and fish and stuff like that. So I think for me, it was something that this was not something that defined him, but it was also him going, I need to be grounded. And I've got a family, I got a wife. Like, how do I keep them when I'm dealing with all this football stuff? So I think that was kind of the cool thing of like, hey, he'll adapt to whatever needs to adapt, and not just for football, but for family as well.
Please, please, please tell me that there is going to be a video coming out of you, CD, and Jon Sumrall getting pedicures.
Ah, man, had we known the whole pedicure thing, we would have invited Dan Orlovsky right off the bat. We would have made sure that
Had
he would
to.
have gotten invited on there. But we would definitely have put that into the actual the video itself. So I gotta be honest, I'm team pedicure. I got no problem. I got
Same.
no problem. Like, I feel like anybody who has ever talked bad about a pedicure is because they've never had one before.
Yes.
Like,
100%.
or
They're mismarketed massages. That's all they are. And feet are gross. Like, feet need work. You can literally, if I have one that's down the street from my house, I could go there and I could have a Bud Light the entire time I'm drinking there, because they figured out, oh, like, men actually like coming here. And this doesn't have to be some taboo thing. But the fact that that Jon Sumrall is a football coach and his wife says that he loves him, he gets like dogged for it. But you're right. It's just people that have not ever experienced what it's like to get a pedicure.
It's so funny because I feel like the people that like scream that to the rooftops are trying to prove how big of an alpha they are, when
Totally.
really the biggest alpha move it is to be like, hell yeah, I like pedicures. Those are
Yeah.
awesome. I don't give a rat's ass what you think. Like, those are badass. So I mean, like, for me, like, like when Summerall was like, yeah, I get them, I'm like, well, yeah, like, absolutely.
More pedicures or wins this year for Sumrall? That's the question.
I'm gonna say definitely wins, because I don't think he's gonna be a weekly pedicure type guy.
Can't be.
So like,
Probably
I
not.
want to say maybe he does maybe twice throughout the actual season itself, but I'm saying they're gonna get more than 2 wins. And what's funny is, I don't know about you, and we kind of talked about this when you and I were in Tampa. I feel as naked going into this season as I ever have regarding who's gonna be really good. Like, I mean, I Georgia and Texas, because of kind of their rosters and from there, but could you see a Florida team with Buster Faulkner and Jaden Ball running the ball all over the map, and them finding a 9-3 schedule, record? Yeah. Could I also see them go 6-6? Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many teams that are in that, like, who the heck knows stage right now.
The margin for error is just so small. And like, I think last year, I brought this up a couple of times. I think I think the game last year that we saw between Alabama and Oklahoma is going to become a lot more of the norm in the SEC. And that's kind of a ho-hum forgettable game, because it wasn't even the final result that mattered, because Alabama obviously got revenge against Oklahoma in the playoff. But like, the type of game that's just a one possession type game where the teams really aren't that far apart, and maybe 6 times out of 10 this team wins, and then 4 times out of 10 this team wins. I just think there's a lot more of that in the SEC this year, and it's why not a single SEC team got a first place vote in the AP poll, yet 7 SEC teams are in the top 13. You don't need AI to check that. I just told that for
Thank you.
So
All right. I was getting my phone ready. I was going to get community noted again. So,
but like, you're right. I feel naked from that standpoint too, because I think the key thing to remember here is you can make a case for a lot of these different SEC teams being the last team standing, and in a given week looking like maybe the best team in the conference. I think that's going to be the theme that's really prevalent, and I think it's going to probably last deep into November.
Yeah, and again, what is the NFL? The NFL is a league that, well, let's say back when it was 16 games, it was an 8-8 league, right? Pretty much everyone, should win some games, should lose some games, be around the same, and there'll be a couple of outliers here and there, but a lot of it came from good quarterback play. You were healthy, and pay attention to details, right? And that's kind of what made the Chiefs really good, or the Eagles when they break out and stuff like that. But other than that, you got a bunch of teams that are ho hum. And now with no one being able to stack rosters like Saban did at Alabama, or even Kirby did before NIL transfer portal, haywire stuff. Now all of that has kind of trickled kind of into more of an NFL roster where everybody has pretty good players and everybody in this conference, top to bottom, cares, right? Like it used to be 5 years ago, we would talk about how much does Vanderbilt care, right? The stadium's terrible. The facilities are not good. They can't even sometimes even have enough players for spring practice and scrimmages,
They
right?
admitted they didn't care and they didn't
Right.
spend
Well,
on football. Like they
correct.
told us.
And then Candace Story Lee said, let's build up the money. Let's get the facilities, get the stadium. Pavia comes, and all of a sudden, they're on the cusp of a college football playoff. I mean, Vanderbilt went 10-2. It's wild. So there's not a team right now that you can say doesn't wake up every single morning and have the means or needs to go and put together a 25 to $30 million roster. Like that's the reality of it in the SEC right now.
It's more entertaining. It just is. Will and I have talked about this. Like, it will make for a more entertaining. It's going to be tougher for fans to accept. Like, even if the Super League thing doesn't happen necessarily, like, but it's just 9-game conference schedule. There's just going to be a lot more of that. And I think it's going to be tough for some of the halves in the conference to prepare for that likelihood. Speaking of that, what is more likely to happen this year? Your UTSA Roadrunners beat Texas, or your LSU Bayou Bengals win a national title year one under Lane Kiffin?
Ooh, I as much as I love Jeff Traylor, Meep, the Fighting Roadrunners, I can't see a world in which that happens. Maybe keeping it close, but I think I think Texas is pretty damn good. Could I see a world in which Lane, in a world of parity, catch lightning in a bottle, and Sam Levitt actually is healthy and he's the guy that's worthy of a $5-6 million deal? Yeah, I mean that defensive line is stacked. They've got a lot more play. They got a lot more weapons. The schedule's tough, but I think once they open up at Clemson at home, you win that thing by double digits, which I think they will. All of a sudden, everybody sees the proof of concept right from the jump. And then it comes to really a matter of, all right, how much do the players believe it and how much is Lane locked in? And I'm a firm believer when Lane Kiffin gets locked in on something, no matter what it is, he's like this bulldog that won't let go. Okay. And I think what he's locked into right now is LSU football and making it a college football playoff, if not a national championship team, as quick as possible.
I think college football collectively ripping Lane for every loss is going to become the norm. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the norm at Ole Miss. I don't really think Lane has been in a role like this since he was at USC. And even at
No.
USC, it was kind of on the back burner because of the post Pete Carroll sanctions and stuff like that. Like, I wonder, how do you think Lane handles it this year? It's almost like LeBron stepping into the villain role at Miami and like having to re-embrace that.
Yeah.
Because so far, Lane, I would argue, has not handled it as well as he could. And it's going to be different when the games are starting.
I think I agree. I think Lane's departure from Ole Miss was messy. I think his start at LSU was messy, but vividly, I do kind of remember his speech over at SEC Media Days, and at first, it kind of seemed like he was filibustering because he didn't want to take questions from the media, and I'm like, come on, dude.
He was.
But I think he was to a certain extent, but then when he started talking about, hey, as you get more successful, what really resonated with me is like you want to do more and more things and you keep adding things into your life. And he goes, lately, I've kind of thought about how do you subtract things from your life? And yeah, that might be some chat GPT, Instagram slogan that you see that comes across your reels. But I do think that there's something to that. And listen, everybody knows I've never carried Lane Kiffin's water, right? Like I think he's a great coach, but I've also had a lot of issues with how he's handled himself over the years. But also, I took a step back as well too, and think, all right, you know, um, while I think a lot of his image was kind of faux image repair last year, I do think now he's finally got the job that he really, really, really wanted at one point. And so, do you continue to act that way, or do you batten down the hatches and roll? And he feels a little bit different, at least over the past 2 weeks. or at least I would say the past 2 months right now. Ever since I think the Vanity Fair article rattled him. I think
I
that
do
was
too.
the last time that he put something out there that was like his old "I've got to blame everybody else" part. And I think the feedback on that was so like over the top that he's like, okay, like I just need to get away from this. And hopefully now he's thrown that into LSU football and it makes it interesting on Louisiana Saturday nights.
Yeah. By the way, nice shirt. Yeah, Matt Hayes brought up that point. That's
Yeah.
a nice shirt. Who are you repping? With the Louisiana
I
Saturday
think
night
this is
shirt?
Phil's Oyster Bar there in Baton Rouge. So
Nice.
if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I think that's the Phil best oyster spot in the place. So
I'm amazed nobody's trademarked Louisiana Saturday night just yet. I don't think so.
these might be bootlegged
Yeah.
t-shirts. You never know. I mean, those are the best type t-shirts. Like it always crushes me when I go to Omaha or go to these places that are NCAA sanctioned places. I'm like, man, I would love a great t-shirt of the event. And it's the most like AI created
It's bad.
one helmet, just vague lettering. I'm like, this is something I'll buy as a souvenir for $45 and I'll use it as like a car rag in like 2 months from now. Like I would never wear that. So more power to the unique t-shirts to say the least.
Shout out to my friends at Home Field. Yes, love me some Home
Homefield
Field.
does a great job of it. Yeah, maybe the best of the biz.
Yeah. Who's your pick to win the SEC this year? Are you on the record with a prediction yet?
I'm on the record that it ends up being Texas. I think for me, I go back and I think the reason why now, of course, we saw Taylor Goolsby injury that gets him a little bit banged up on the offensive line, but teams are going to have that. Looks like he's going to be back for the Ohio State game. Hopefully, I think it's a bruise. But I think when the whole plan for Arch to come to Texas was built upon winning a national championship in 2026. I think that was the whole game plan. It was, you're going to come here, you're going to redshirt, then you're going to play a little bit, you're going to play a little bit more, and then 2026, all these worlds are going to converge. We're all in. We're going to get you the Cam Colemans. We're going to hit free agency, and this is the year, right? And so I think that was the pitch always. And I think if you didn't have the name Arch Manning behind it, you would look at it and go, this is how quarterbacks used to progress. This is how almost Peyton and even Eli to a certain extent did it. And so I think, again, I don't think he's the greatest quarterback in the history of the world, but I also think he's one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in all of college football right now. And you combine that with a roster that can get it done, a coaching staff that spared no expense. I think they are the team that wins it in Atlanta.
I agree. So let's get you out of here with then that feeds in perfectly to this last question. How many of these boxes will Arch check this year in what we expect to be his last college year? Okay. Atlanta, New York, Las Vegas.
I'm going to say Atlanta and New York. So Heisman invite, Atlanta berth. Vegas, I don't know. I mean, I say that. I know that's a cop out. I'm going to say no just because of how tough college football is right now. I think that we can make predictions on who's going to play in a national championship in 2021. And we had a clear cut, hey, unless this team just falters, they're in. But now, if Miami's going to be good, if Oregon's going to be really good, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, A&M could be a sleeper, Georgia, Ohio State. You look at all these teams, could I see them playing for a national championship? Yeah, I really could. I could make a case for a dozen teams winning the national championship this year, and it wouldn't completely shock me. And I think that's damn good for the sport.
I do too. It needed to get more national. It probably did.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, again, there's zero doubt that it got more national. And I truthfully, maybe one of the best things to happen was the miscalculation by media and fans to think when NIL started that the SEC was only going to get bigger, better, badder, and stronger. What it did was it did make them bigger, better, badder, and stronger, but the entire conference is at upper band right now, where I think the advantage that the Big Ten has is that you have teams that are higher echelon national championship teams, but I don't think you have how many teams are in the Big Ten now? 18?
18.
18, yes. I don't think you have 18 teams that are locked in 365 days a year, all systems go on college football about how we can win a national championship. I don't know if that's the case. I could make the argument maybe for 8 to 10 of them are, but I think even the Mississippi States, even Arkansas of the world, and Vanderbilt, these teams that really have not done real well, I think that you can say that every single day they're putting the money behind trying to make a national championship roster. And I think that's why it's tougher to cut through in the SEC.
Purdue just hired an athletic director who just forgot who won the previous national championship. So
it was a tough look. It was a tough look going, don't go to, Indiana doesn't win national championships. I'm like, buddy, gotta scratch that out, I love Cignetti. Like, dude, people are hating on Cignetti. I'm like, what has Cignetti done? Like he brought in a national championship team to a place that you should never do. Like in theory, right? He did everything what you and I would have done on NCAA football 15 years ago, which was take a team that wasn't good, recruit really well, and win a natty and kind of have some swagger doing it. And I love it. I love Curt Cignetti. That, I don't know if you remember that last thing here. That game, there's a video clip of him right before kickoff against Alabama. And Pat McAfee is over there, and he looks over at Cignetti, and Cignetti just kind of gives him a look like it was over. Like it was, he knew this is about to be different. And like from that moment, I'm like, dude, this guy has a serial killer mentality, and I love it. And if you don't like it, be better. Like, love that guy.
By the way, PB, you did just give us the clip that I need now to fight back on social media. If anybody ever calls you out for being an SEC homer, we will clip that part right there, and we'll put it in the replies and say, no, you idiot. Look at what he just said about Curt Cignetti in Indiana. So
I listen, I love the fact that the Big Ten has finally gotten to the table and with these national championships. I love it. And I love Indiana winning it, because I think that tells every other Big Ten team as well too. Like, why can't you be it? Like, if Indiana can do that, could you be the next Indiana? Right. And I think that's only going to raise the level of the Big Ten. And we're already seeing that this year. And in theory, that should raise the boats of the SEC as well too. Right. And so I think that's where all sports fans are going to ultimately, see better football being played. That's great for everybody.
College football, stock up. Many are saying
stock up in a cornfield. Yeah, we got to do
exactly.
Yes.
PB, you're the man. We'll do it again soon.
See you, bud.
All right. Well, let's end with a quick housekeeping note or two. We are back to 2 pods a week. Like I said, we're going to be Tuesday, Friday before the start of the season. And then once week 1, not week 0, once week 1 gets here, we will have our preview pods that come out on Wednesday. We preview all the power conference games that are being played by SEC teams. We'll have some other thoughts probably for that week 1 pod as well. And then we have our Sunday recap pods. I realize that we have an SEC game on a Sunday. We will still get to all the action that unfolded on Saturday. So that's going to be our schedule moving forward. We are 2 pods a week throughout the rest of the year. So cheers to that. One other thing. Have you accepted my ALS Ice Bucket Challenge yet, or am I still waiting on that?
Yes, I absolutely accepted it. I got that. What a big day for news that day was. But yeah, I got that as I was like driving home. But we're in talks. We got a little setup coming. It's going to be over the weekend. Put you like that.
I look forward to it. I just want to make sure my guy was locked in. Make sure we're not going to let down a bunch of people. In all seriousness, no, like it is kind of crazy to see that come back. I actually got that invitation from Brad Crawford on the same day that like my Facebook memory showed like a 12-year anniversary from the first Ice Bucket Challenge. I was like, dang, man, time just kind of flies. But yeah, good to see so many people raising awareness for ALS after the Chris Johnson diagnosis.
Did you hit a little? Still got it? Did you hit a little? I saw the flex you had going on.
That was after cardio. That was after cardio. That was not after a lift. Let the record show.
You were like, dude, I got dad strength now. I'm yoked. 12 years forward. Progress.
Dad strength is real, man. It is real. Some people are saying that's just a myth. Nope, it is absolutely not. Look, I don't like to necessarily flaunt it all the time. And when the guns come out, the guns come out. That's what I would say. All right, looking forward to seeing that from Will this weekend at some point. I guilted Jim Dunaway about it too, because I challenged him as well, and he's going to have something. He's had a couple of different attempts at it that unfortunately have not lined up, but he will be doing his as well this weekend. Like I said, email us, theogkickoff@gmail.com. We'd love to be able to hear from you. Takes going into the season. We're going to try and do a mailbag episode maybe once a month during the season, and then we'll have we'll read some of those responses that we get at the end of the episodes that we got coming up here. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to The Next Round as well as the OG Kickoff on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, the OG Kickoff. CJ O'Gara, go so hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.